Good? Okay. Let the time get away with me here, so we're a little bit late. I'm going to call the special select board meeting of Tuesday, November 19th to order as of 7:03. And first item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Approval of the minutes of our October 8th, 2019 select board meeting.
Moved.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Any requested changes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as drafted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Are there any citizens that are here for something that is not on the agenda? Yes, sir.
It's on the agenda, though, well, unless you wanted to speak to it sooner.
No, if it's on the agenda, you could, let's make sure it's on the agenda. You sure it's on the agenda?
Yeah, I know why they're here, so.
Okay,
yes.
very good.
Okay.
All right, so next item is for, almost, I didn't see Dan.
Dustin is going to,
I think Dustin's here to do it. So Dustin, a recommendation on, from the Parks and Recs Department on purchase of a utility vehicle.
Yep, so I believe,
We don't have to lean
Yes.
in, it's this close.
you all have a copy of the recommendation that was approved by the Infrastructure Committee. So I basically wanted to come here tonight and see if there's any questions. I can present my findings again if you guys would like.
No, they're pretty straightforward.
I just have a comment.
Okay.
And I already had a chance to talk to Dustin just before the meeting about this, because I was disappointed that we hadn't gone to electric for especially a utility vehicle, knowing that that is a future direction we want to be going in. But Dustin did explain that they did do careful vetting of it. And I asked if there was a possibility for delaying this decision for when the technology might come along. And they feel that it's really important to get this online now for the next spring season, so that the fields can be attended to, because they haven't been attended to for a while, and that's what this vehicle would enable. And that you did talk to the college, to see how they were managing, because I was curious, because we know that they have electric utility vehicles. And I'm glad to know that the rec department will be hosting a new electric charger in the spring. They applied for a grant, and they're going to be getting one, so they're definitely moving in that direction, which is great to see. And I hope we continue to move in that direction.
Absolutely.
And Dustin did present, this information in his work towards an electrical vehicle and infrastructure committee,
Yep.
When we approved it, so.
Well,
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I understand that, but I also know that the Energy Committee is supposed to be available to help research things too, and I don't know if they were, not that they would have found something different, I don't know if they could have delved and found.
Yeah, and they did offer their help, and I think they were satisfied with the due diligence that we had done.
Okay, all right, that would have been, what I would have been looking for too, and I'm glad to know that. And while Dustin is here, I just wanted to say that I'm glad to see the new winter program out, and the buildings used to full capacity.
6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day.
And that we noticed that the recycling bins seem to be disappearing from the rec center. So I'm just mentioning that tonight, because please don't take them, if that's what's happening, because we do want to keep up with sorting our trash and recycling, and look forward to replacing those so that people can continue to do that.
Thank you, Laura.
So I'll move to award a contract to Broughton's Farm Supply for the purchase of a 4x4 utility vehicle for the use by the Parks and Rec Department for a total cost of $11,968.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final questions? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Dustin.
Next is an application from a Caddy Shack with 260 Exchange Street for a first-class liquor license. And don't believe Josh is here, but Chief, did you get an opportunity to inspect that yet?
I have not, just coordinating with Chief Shaw, just had to get together.
Okay. In the past, we have done some recommendations where we
Pending.
approve it pending required safety inspections. Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the application submitted by the Caddyshack for a first-class liquor license for its business located at 260 Exchange Street, pending the successful completion of the required public safety inspections.
Second.
Moved and seconded, are there any comments on that? Hearing none, all in favor signify by... Yeah.
I just noticed, looking at this, that two of the questions weren't answered. That's all. I mean, they're supposed to be yes and no. I'm assuming that the answers were no, or intended to be no.
What are we talking about?
On the actual application?
On the application.
On the application, yeah.
Where's, right here.
Any person been convicted or pleaded guilty in the past years, any person held an elective office.
So we'll follow up with them to make sure it's completed.
Hmm?
Yeah,
We'll follow up with the
Yes.
applicant to make
Yes,
sure
I
it's
think,
completed.
okay.
I assume that the answer to both those questions was intended to be no, but they should be checked.
I guess I would make a recommendation that maybe we can do
Yeah.
it subject to those both being
Subject to
no
Yes.
as well. Okay with amending the
Okay.
recommendations?
Sure, I'll amend it to subject to finishing off the application correctly.
And the required public safety inspections?
Yes.
And the public
Yeah.
safety inspection.
Okay.
And the public safety inspections.
All right. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? All right, now, the biggest reason why we set this date and are here is an opportunity to discuss with our local legislators. And I'll ask them to come forward. We have nice seats and mics for you. And we've scheduled a full hour. We brainstormed at the last meeting. And I think you've probably seen the list of some of the things we're interested in. Maybe not?
I just saw it.
You just got
I
it?
emailed everybody on Friday night.
Okay.
So,
Anyways, welcome, and we really do appreciate this opportunity. We got it started back up again last year. It was something the board used to do, and it had fallen by the wayside. I think there's value in it for both parties, but especially for our local citizens, an opportunity. We have pretty good viewership on local TV, and an opportunity for them to hear what's on your mind and what's going on, and for us to ask some of the questions as far as how it impacts us. So with that, maybe what's hot, I would ask you, and then we'll let the board ask you questions on some of the things, topics, but maybe we'll start with working on currently, and what do you see as hot for the upcoming legislative session?
Sure, so, thank you, it's nice to be back, seeing you all again, time flies. I'll just briefly list, I think, the major things that we'll be working through this session, and some connect to our last discussion. For instance, we were talking about the single-use plastics bill when we were here a year ago, and that has passed and becomes effective statewide on July 1st of 2020. And then we created a working group as part of that bill to look at further improvements to the overall system around solid waste. And that working group has been meeting this fall and will continue to work. I'm not sure, that we're not completed yet. We have 2 more meetings and a report to write. But basically, we paused to look at the solid waste system overall and look to see how well it's working and how we might make improvements in terms of reducing, in essence, the amount of waste generated from the beginning, and then increasing the percentage of that waste that ends up getting recycled or reused as opposed to landfilled. So that work's ongoing, and I think Middlebury finessed things in terms of you were a town that voted to take action and build, I did that on behalf of every municipality in the state. And as best I know, what Middlebury was looking for was a pretty good fit for what the bill accomplished. I don't know if the town has more requests, but so I think that's a work in progress. Last night, I know this is a topic of more interest than people might imagine, solid waste management for the district. We had a meeting in Bristol last night, and there was a full room with people who wanted to know more about solid waste management, the bottle bill, et cetera. So I think we'll continue to work on that. And Addison County Solid Waste District, I think, actually has a great staff. They've been helpful, informative, forward-looking. They run it in a very citizen-friendly way. So I think we're fortunate to have that facility and the staff that it has. Just briefly, we also did a bill related to PFAS, so per and polyfluorinated alkanes. And one of the aspects of that was to have to do a statewide survey of municipal water supplies. I don't know if Middlebury's had its water tested yet. That's in progress. I mean, in terms of completing an inventory statewide. Happily, there have, I think, as of a week or so ago, there were only 3 towns that had were showing levels that were of concern to the state. So that work continues. And Act 250 is really Amy's bailiwick. I know that we're expecting to be doing some additional work that very likely will be coming from the House to the Senate this coming session. And because we're all interested in land, air, and water and how we use them well, and how they are increasingly under pressure from things like development or climate change, heavy rain events, storm water, et cetera. That's going to be an ongoing area of work for both the House and Senate in the coming session. Looking forward, one of the things that I'm working with people this summer and fall on is what I generally refer to as beneficial electrification. So that is shifting away from fossil fuels and taking care of things that we needed fossil fuels for, as in heating and cooling buildings, as well as moving people and goods around. Transportation and thermal loads have been largely fossil fuel dependent, and there's an opportunity to make them increasingly clean in terms of by shifting them to using electricity. So we don't want to have a lot of electric vehicles on the road, though, that are powered from way behind the scenes by coal-fired plants somewhere else. So the beneficial electrification refers to the idea that you're not only electrifying loads that were formerly met by fossil fuels, but you're also, the energy you're using, the electricity you're using is clean. And that's the heart of the beneficial electrification bill. The way to get there that we're exploring is, or will be exploring a lot more once the session starts, is we already have a nationally and internationally known and well-respected Efficiency Vermont program. They've been working in this with us, and the idea is to modernize or pivot with Efficiency Vermont and allow them to increasingly do work not just in clean electricity, but also in bringing that clean electricity to thermal and transportation. So those are some of the biggest things that are on the plate, I know, for this coming session right now. And I would say they all have a deep connection to Middlebury and the county, really. I'll stop there.
Senator Sheldon?
Representative. So I am the chair of the House Natural Resources Fish and Wildlife Committee, and I'm not sure if Senator Bray mentioned, but he's the chair of Senate Natural Resources. And so we get to work closely together and coordinate how bills are going to move through our two committees. As he mentioned, and as you are aware, my committee's been very focused on Act 250 and looking to update it to include climate change. In that, I won't go into too many of the details of it, but we are looking to support the basic goals of Act 250 around, dense settled areas surrounded by rural working lands and conserved areas. And that'll probably include some work around, lifting jurisdiction in our downtown areas. And Middlebury has a downtown area, and we're also looking at the neighborhood development areas, which Middlebury has immediately adjacent to our downtown. And that would be something that would exempt the downtown areas from Act 250. And that would be for communities, obviously, who've done all their planning homework and are meeting the state goals around Act 250 already, which I would say Middlebury's done a great job at that. My committee will be also looking at wildlife governance issues, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Some of the ones that just came up, we were going to be taking up wildlife governance before we had the unfortunate incident up in Ripton with the bear hounds. We were looking at wanton waste anyway in my committee, and also had a bill that was that does look at overall how can we modernize wildlife governance to reflect the sort of modern Vermont and people's ethics around wildlife and wildlife management. So we'll be taking that up. As Senator Bray mentioned, there's PFAS issues. Middlebury did test, and because I looked at the tests online recently, the state has a really helpful webpage to find out who's exceeding our standard that we set last session. Middlebury cleared that hurdle. It's good news. The communities that are finding PFAS above the state standard are condominiums so far, really, public water supplies for condominiums, and this suspected source of the PFAS is actually ski wax. So the sort of ubiquitous nature of this chemical, this class of chemicals, in my mind, is represented by that. Who knew? Who knew could be in your ski wax too? So it's kind of a bummer. I know Robin's probably going to talk some about the Climate Solutions Caucus, but I will mention that coming from, in the House, we have House Natural Resources, and then we have Energy and Technology Committee. And on our side, also coordinating with Senator Bray, he gets to do both of those, and is a bill, the Global Warming Solutions Act, which will essentially create a legal mechanism for accountability around our energy goals. And how that gets worked out will be taken up in-house Energy and Technology early in the session, and then hopefully sent over to Senator Bray's committee. And with that, I know that Ruth and Robin have plenty to add, so I'll let them talk.
Okay, thank you, Representative. So I was looking.
promotion.
I know. I was looking at Chris.
It's a lateral moving.
Lateral, yeah.
Some people do, yeah. Demotion.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you. I don't know how you all can hear me, right? Is this enough? Okay. Thank you for having us again. It's always a pleasure to talk with all of you. One bill that I talked about last year, and I know that Nick, you had a particular interest in this, was the quote-unquote free college bill. It's not really free, but I'm continuing to work on that, and I'm really hoping that the Senate Education Committee will focus on it. We made a lot of progress trying to figure out how we can do support tuition, at least tuition support or reduction for students, particularly at our community colleges and potentially at our state colleges more broadly. I'm focusing in on the community colleges in particular because that's an area where there's the highest student need, and that's the highest that's the system that has the highest percentage of Vermonters also. So I've been working closely with CCV, and hopefully we'll have something this session in that area. And I know it's not exactly directly related, but I know there are a lot of Middlebury residents who do go to CCV, so I'm hoping that that will have some benefits to our community. I'm also in an off-session study committee called the Vermont Forest Carbon Sequestration Working Group. And I actually was up in Montpelier this afternoon working on that. It's really complicated, but one thing that is relevant to town, to Middlebury, is that one of the things we are, so carbon sequestration markets are, you have a forest and it meets certain criteria, and you can enter that forest, this is a really quick version of it, into a carbon market and sell shares of those carbon credits to do offsets. So you hear about people buying carbon offsets for flying, or there are companies that are required to do it. There's a California compliance market, and then there's a voluntary market. So I can tell you a heck of a lot more about it if you're interested, but one of the things we're looking at is having a program for municipal forests to be able to enter into this, and having the state try to work with municipal forests across the state to aggregate them into one sort of, for the purpose of this, one sort of collective municipal forests that could then be entered in a carbon market and potentially bring revenue to municipalities for their forests beyond what you might already be getting. So I'd be happy to talk to any of you, or whomever in this town government is a relevant person, to get sort of feedback on your thoughts on that. And then there's a lot more to that too, but that's the direct relevance to Middlebury. As you may recall, we passed a bill last session to test all school water for lead. That bill passed, and we have the highest standards in the nation for making sure that our school water is as lead-free as possible. All of the Middlebury schools have been tested, and all of the Middlebury child care centers to this date, I believe, have also been tested. I've been following closely. So far, there have been no major problems in terms of, dig up the pipes and restart everything. Most of it is just replacing taps, or just saying, this is too far gone, we're gonna just cut this one off and not use it anymore. So that's good news, and it's great news that our kids are not drinking water with lead in it when they're at school. We're also gonna be working on pre-K in the education committee, and working on trying to figure out how to make that system work better for both our schools and child care centers and families. The Agriculture Committee, I'm introducing a bill on local foods, and trying to do more support for local foods in our schools, and also potentially in our correctional facilities, and with the goal of getting more local foods into people's stomachs, and also to get more revenue for our local farmers. There's a Wetlands Committee, which
We're both on.
they're both on. So it's got, Addison County is covered, and it's really wet here, and there's a lot of wetlands. So it's really an important topic for our county. It was something that my Agriculture Committee worked on a lot last session, and we never could come to some solutions, so we punted it over to them to work on. And that's the major things right now. I think Robin will probably talk about the blanking on the word.
Climate solution?
The climate
Yep.
stuff, and also the minimum wage,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, Representative Shy.
Hi. Thanks again for having us. This is great, and look forward to doing this on a more regular basis, so it's good. So last year at the end of the session, can you hear me all right? I have a bit of a cold, so, okay. At the end of the session, the House adjourned before the Senate did, and so the Senate actually sent the House back some bills, but we had adjourned, so we are going to be taking them up first thing when we start in January. And two of those bills are the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program bill and the minimum wage bill. So I know we will be addressing those early on, taking a look at those. And I should also mention that I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, so that's taxes and fees. And as my committee chair has said, she said, if you're on appropriations, which is the budget, and people come to your committee and you don't get what you want, you're disappointed. But on our committee, we tax people and they get mad. So you're sad in appropriations and mad coming into Ways and Means. So it's interesting. So the House will be picking up paid family medical leave and minimum wage. Also, the tax and regulation of cannabis is at the moment residing in my committee. It came near the end of the session and way too big to get started on in early May. So it is in my committee. I don't expect it will, there are other committees that need to take a look at this. So I don't know what the process is going to be, whether it's going to go out to other committees, whether the other committees are going to come in, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So while we'll probably be addressing it in our committee, I wouldn't expect it to get to the floor in the first month. That would be my guess. So those are some things. So we hosted a Climate Solutions Caucus meeting here on November 7th, so a little while ago, and we had almost 60 people show up at the meeting. It was great. We had good attendance. There are 80 legislators in the House and the Senate, or maybe more than 80, at least 80, that are members of the Climate Solutions Caucus. So it has a lot of representation. Amy mentioned the Global Warming Solutions Act, and that is being worked on. Many other states have such an act. Massachusetts has had one since 2008, and they're now on revisions of that act. So there are other states that are a bit far ahead of us. So the sort of 4 pillars that we're looking at under the caucus of legislation and things we want to pay attention to, that is one of them. Workforce development, especially as it relates to thermal efficiency, as we move towards fewer fossil fuels and what all that means. That means that the jobs will change also, and there'll be need for people to do different kinds of HVAC, putting in heat pumps, and all kinds of other things. So there's a whole workforce development element to it as well. Resiliency in communities is going to be really important. We've had 2 snow days already. It's not even Thanksgiving. I don't remember that ever happening before. Things are changing, and resiliency becomes that much more important. And then the 4th piece is the TCI, or the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is a program that's being worked on, and it's a coalition of 12 states and Washington, D.C., I think is what the count is. So it starts in D.C. and comes all the way up to the Northeast, and there are some of the governor's staff are working on that as well. And the notion is to put a fee on carbon at the highest level, sort of at the wholesalers where stuff enters in. Yes, it probably gets passed down, but if you think about your gas bill, they have gas sales for 5 cents off, today. So things fluctuate. And it's sort of a cap and trade type program. And, we have often talked about the fact of if we do something like this, we'd want it to be regional, because just Vermont by itself, it's a lot harder to do. Well, here we have this regional thing that's being worked on, so that's pretty exciting. Other things that we may be talking about in my committee, it's
Hamilton.
The governor and his cabinet was here yesterday for the Capitol for a day. I think some of you met with them, and I was at the tax meeting. So I work a lot with the tax department. And one of the things they've asked us to take a look at is the way the renter rebate program works on our taxes for education and property taxes. I don't know where it's going to go, but I know that it's one of the things that we get complaints about from renters, because if you're going to get a rebate on your education property tax and you're in a household with multiple people who aren't related, you have to ask everybody what they make, and they have to put together total household income, and it gets not only intrusive but complicated. And so the tax department's looking for ways to simplify that. So I imagine we'll be talking about that in our committee. One of a number of things we'll be talking about. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, well, thank you. It's nice broad brush idea of what's going on and coming on in your committees. We made a list of some things that are of interest of us here at the, in the Middlebury community, that we're hoping that either you can take up and that the state is starting to look at, or that we can get some updates when you get back there from. And so I'll just read a topic and then let the select board maybe expound upon it. And so the first one was vagrancy and its impacts on the community and local law enforcement. And so.
You want to speak first?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is something actually that, quite honestly, I've been hearing about for the decade. I've been on this board, and even before working in the Public Safety Committee, and I'm the board rep on public safety. And it was recently brought up some really good details about what's going on with this by Chief Hanley and Sergeant Covey, who are both here, on what they've been encountering. And Chief Hanley started off quite well, and I don't know if we want to have the Chief and Sergeant Covey come up and go through it, but there's really three parts of the population that have some challenges. Now, it's been, I think, misunderstood. There's been a lot of discussion about the homeless population, and that's not the segment that is causing difficulties. And as Chief said, and we all agree, these are the people who, through some scenario or unfortunate set of scenarios, have entered in this homeless community, and they want to be productive members of the community, and they're working to get to that point. And so in that case, it's trying to find ways to provide housing for them, shelters, so they can get on their feet and again, be productive. The second group is this group that suffers from various mental illnesses or certainly substance abuses. They've been very challenging. In some cases, they get very violent. Often they take our officers away for extended periods of time from the community. And then the third group is this sort of increase I guess we've seen in this transient nature of people. I'm sitting there thinking, as they're talking about the author, Ted Conover, wrote a book a couple years ago, well, several years ago, called Rolling Nowhere, in which he studied people who rode the rails around the country. And you find there's a variety of people who tend to be some free spirits, some who are trying to escape society, and some who are just genuine troublemakers. And we've been seeing an increase in number of that around, and they've been taxing our officers. And as we've heard recently, officers being taken away for, again, a long period of time. They have to transport people to Burlington, taking them away for 6 to 8 hours. And so there are times we don't have an on-duty police officer ready to go if we need them because of these things. They have to call somebody on if we need them. And it is putting a strain. And these are issues that we as a shire town, and every shire town I'm sure are encountering, and we can't deal. It's not the things that we can deal with. These are state issues. These are things with the various agencies that have been established to help these people, and in some cases are doing things well, and in some cases we're seeing it's just not successful. And so these are very critical to us, and I don't know if we want to bring up officers to tell some of the stories they've had, or if it's worth it.
Mayor, I don't know how much you're aware of. You've been reading, and you probably read the article in the Addison Independent. Chief, can you maybe quantify it?
Yeah, the problem has grown over the last few years. We are essentially the kid with the finger in the dike. We are not fixing anything. We have a woefully under-resourced mental health system in this state. We have recommendations from a task force that I was on for 3 years that made recommendations on how to deal with alcohol problems. None of these things has ever been implemented. And that puts a strain on our police department, because when we get somebody that's incapacitated, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, the same person, I need 2 officers to take them to Rutland or Act 1 or to jail or someplace, and that ties them up. But it's a repeat over and over again. We have no facility here in our area to deal with this, so we have to take them out of the county to do that. It's killing us overtime-wise, it's killing us staffing-wise. And then to the other issues that go on, the day-to-day stuff, the problem with this one stabs this one's burning the other one's tent down, fighting with each other, getting drunk and getting lost and having to go find them, on and on and on and over. As Nick said, there's a group, I don't want to call them groups, it's a bad word to use, but some of the people that are homeless are not there by choice. They economic issues, family issues, bad things have happened in their life, and they're looking to get a way out. Some of these other guys, other people, not so much. When we talk about an under-resourced mental health system, when we're spending 6 to 8 hours taking care of somebody at Porter Hospital because there is no other way to take care of them, and no mental health place to put them, no counseling to take care of them or give them the counseling they need, that's a problem. It's a problem that it happens over and over and over again and has been growing. I don't know how much more, we'll keep doing it, but we've got other problems in town that need attention as well. And you're well aware of the complaints we get with speeding cars here and this and that. We can't do any of that. We are just simply taking care of people that are unable to care for themselves for whatever reason. Our use of Narcan has gone way up for some of the other issues. And as I said, homelessness, there's all these tangential issues that are part of that problem. And some of those are the mental health stuff at the hospital. We're meeting with the doctors tomorrow to try to resolve some issues that we've had in dealing with the folks up there. These things need to be addressed. This recommendation from 2010, the Public Inebriate Committee that I was on, here's the report. You guys, I don't know if you guys, you probably got it, Chris, from back then. Made a bunch of recommendations, and not a single one was ever acted on. And we're still in the same boat. In fact, in a few years, we don't know what we're going to do with an inebriate because the jail's going to stop taking them. At least we can always take them to jail if we can't find another place to put them, and that's going to end. So we don't know what we're going to do with them. The law requires us to take an inebriate into custody, protective custody, and do something with them. And we're running out of places to put them. So these are problems. These are social problems that we have that are starting to have an impact on the greater community, and certainly impacting how we operate on the police department.
Brian, I'd like to add one more thing if I could, and I'll quiet and let others say something. And it was something that we were all made aware of recently, and it's a little story. A couple weeks ago, I had a situation where our police officers were dispatched, evening shift, I think, to assist the Vermont State Police with an incident at Porter Hospital. Now, I don't know what it was, but when you're sending state police and town police to the hospital, it's probably not a meet and greet. While they were en route, they received an alarm of a child who had stopped breathing, an infant had stopped breathing. And so they changed their dispatch because the ambulance was already out on a call. They were waiting for a second crew to come in, and these officers wisely responded to help the situation. Responded there, found a child who was blue, not breathing. They made a decision to transport the child. And en route, the officer who was tending to the child while the other was driving brought the child back to breathing. So we had a really good outcome on that situation. Had our police officers been, as Chief says, in Burlington or Rutland transporting, then the outcome may have been different. And from where we sit here, it would be pretty hard, or from where Kathleen is, where she would get a call from a citizen that says, I called for emergency services and they didn't come. That'd be a pretty tough thing. And this is something it's a big problem, as you heard the chief say, and it's not something that's going to obviously be solved in one session, but it's something that needs to be closely looked at so that our agencies are doing the best they can. We're hopefully eliminating redundancy that may exist, and it's a good objective-driven scenario so that, again, our citizens are receiving the help that we all expect they can get, but we're not, say, overstressing the forces that we have here for the roles that especially our police officers are encountering, but that's not what they're meant to do. So that's all I'm going to add for now. So,
Chris.
Yeah, I have a question. I'd like to understand this better. I'm sure we all do. From the board's point of view or the chief's point of view, I'm just trying to understand what's changed in the last decade. Is it both the population to be served, like it's more various and more numerous? And are there resources that used to be available and have been withdrawn, or?
Let me go to Chief on that, especially because he was a part of that task force.
Yeah, we've always dealt with the homeless issues here. It's been manageable. We pick them up on the street sometime late at night if it's cold. We bring them to the police station and give them a place to stay. We used to have an arrangement with Hope where we could take them to the Blue Spruce and get a voucher for a room. It was manageable. Most of them were from the area. We have seen a migration here from all over the place. We've got one guy here from Washington State, another one from Ohio, another one was here from East St. Louis, New York, Massachusetts. They're just coming here in droves. And in the past year and a half, it's really, really gotten a lot more serious than it ever had been. You know, when we were dealing with people from the county, it was pretty easy. You could always find a place to put somebody. You knew the families. You could deal with them a little better. You knew what was going on. You knew the backgrounds. You really understood the dynamic of where they were going. And you could work with Gene over at Hope and some of the other folks to resolve it and not make it a chronic situation. We're getting a chronic situation here. And again, they're coming here, and they tell us they're coming here because of the services Vermont has to offer. That's why they're here. They stop in Burlington, and then they hop an Actor bus and come down to Middlebury. Dougie gets them at the shelter, and we work with Doug all the time and try to manage stuff like this. And this is the problem that we've had in the past year and a half or so, I'd say. It's really, really expanded.
Thank you.
Quick question, Chief. You said the recommendations were made when, in 2010?
On the alcohol report, the inebriate report?
Yeah.
Yeah, the report to the legislature was issued in January 2010.
It was to the legislature, not to the town.
No, it was to the legislature. It was a legislative study committee. It was a
Oh, okay.
task force and then a study committee.
And nothing happened since then?
No, it's still sitting there with all the recommendations. Addison County is the only county without a screener. We can't take somebody that's an inebriate anywhere unless they're medically screened. We don't have a screener, and what happens is we'll take them, usually if we can find a place to put them, some responsible adult, we can put them with a responsible adult. But because of the transient nature of the people today, there are no responsible adults to take them. We're not going to bring an inebriate to the shelter that was maybe causing trouble.
Yeah.
If they're really out of hand, we have to take them to jail, or we take them to the Grace House, but they've got to be screened down in Rutland. We'll take them to Porter Hospital. They'll do an initial screening there, or they say they need to be at Grace House or somewhere. Take them there. We take them to Grace House, and they say you need to take them to Rutland Hospital for screening. Rutland Hospital's calling the emergency room here and say, why are we dealing with this person? So it's created these inherent conflicts between all the agencies as to what do you do with an inebriate who's somewhat out of control? And that's the problem. If they're peaceful, it's not a problem. You can find a bed for them somewhere. Yep. If they're not, they are a problem. You have to have two people deal with them. Now, when we put them in the back of our police car, that's how we transport them. These are not designed to be transporting people for 40 miles. These are designed to pick somebody up on the street downtown and take them to the police station, 5-minute transport. They're handcuffed, they're placed in the back of the car. It's kind of confining. We worry about positional asphyxia. Somebody's got to monitor them during the transport, so it always takes two people. And that's the problem. It's not a matter of, like I told the committee way back when, it's not a matter of if we lose somebody, it's going to be when. Because we don't know what other things they've ingested at the time that we pick them up. All we know is they're inebriated, blowing numbers on the PBT, and they need to be taken into protective custody.
Can I follow up on that screener thing?
Yeah.
Who can be a screener, and why don't we have one?
We had a screener up until the early 90s. It was funded by the state through the counseling service. The funding was withdrawn, and we lost our screener. Phyllis Severson used to do it, if you remember Phyllis.
But what do they do?
They come in and do a basic medical screening, blood pressure, pulse. They do a quick little examination, ask a lot of questions. There was a questionnaire that they had to fill out to see if they needed to be taken to jail or taken to some other place or brought to the hospital. We've had some here with fairly severe alcohol problems where they really need to be hospitalized.
And is the screener housed at the hospital, or where does that person
The
operate?
screener, in the old days, if I can say that, the screener was worked for the counseling service and she was on call.
Okay.
And so when we had an inebriate, we'd call the number of the counseling service. The screener would meet us right at the police station. She'd do the basic screening, the medical screening, and then make a determination whether they should be in-capped, is what we call it, incapacitated and brought to a facility, or they needed to go somewhere else.
And do you know, are your peers around the state having the same issue?
Somewhat, but every other county has screeners. So we're the one without screeners, and
Is that that's your number one kind of ask or hope, is a screener?
yeah, we need to streamline the whole public inebriate. If you look at the statute, they're ours, and they're supposed to be screened. They're supposed to be handled with care. The statute has all these things that you're supposed to do with them. It's like when we pick up somebody for mental health issues, if they're in crisis, we bring them up and we warehouse them at Porter Hospital till they can find a bed somewhere in the state. And they've been there sometimes up to 2 weeks without any treatment in a little 6x8 room. That's not dealing with an issue. And that continues to be a problem for us because sometimes their behavior is a little disruptive and we have to stay with them. I think Jason could tell you stories about sitting with them for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. One guy 3 days in a row, I think, wasn't it? We finally brought him up to UVM just for some place to put them. Now, fortunately, with most of the homeless and folks we have around town, our officers all know them. We have a pretty good relationship with them. We do not have a hostile relationship with the folks in town. We can usually talk to them and try to resolve issues locally. But it's just a lot. And it's, I've had people come up to you, need more policemen to deal with. That's not the answer. That's not the fix. The fix, I think Randy wrote, I read something that Randy wrote, and he's right on the money with that. These are individuals with individual issues, and you can't just throw a blanket over it and say, let's give them 10, let them sleep outside, or let's do this. That's not a fix. The fix is find out what's going on with these individuals and get them the individual attention that they need. And that's the only way it's gonna be fixed.
So what are the services they think we have that they're coming here for?
I don't know.
Yeah, so that seems like a
That-
disconnect to me because
Yeah.
what we hear all the time is we don't have enough services, and you even started your thing by saying we don't have enough mental health services, we don't have enough housing services.
Yeah.
So I find it really hard to believe that the reason that people are coming here is because we have all these awesome services.
That's what they tell us. Maybe when they come here, they find it's not the case, but I'm
And-
only telling you, they're telling us why, how did you
Is
get
it
here?
still happening now that the weather has turned cold? And I also find it a little hard to believe that it's only a Middlebury issue. I mean, Representative Sheldon just asked you if other towns are having this problem. You said
We
no.
are ground zero for it in Middlebury, only because there's stuff here.
I think that's,
For Addison County, you mean?
For Addison County, yeah,
For
Burlington.
Addison County, okay.
Burlington's got issues,
So-
Rutland's got issues, any
Right.
place where you're a shire town where you've got, we're not alone. Burlington has got.
And you
far
also
more.
seem to be suggesting that the biggest part of the problem is intoxication, and that you have this report from 2010. What is it, so that you, and Amy asked you, the number one thing you're asking for is a screener. Are there other things you think that would help?
We'd like to have a place somewhere local to put them. We have no place to put them.
We used to, right? We did. Wasn't very good, but we had something.
Yeah, the sheriff used to be able to hold them at
Right.
his lockup there, and that's not possible anymore. But so, the danger is we're taking somebody against their will because they're incapacitated. We're treating them like a criminal. They're handcuffed and placed in a police car. We're taking them around to get screened someplace, Porter Hospital, Rutland Hospital, and from there, if they say they don't need medical treatment, and then we take them down to Grace House if they're behaving. If not Grace House, we take them to jail. And when they're in jail, they're there until their blood alcohol goes to a certain level, the door is open, and they're kicked out.
Do you have data on this? Because, I mean, I'm still not clear as to, like, what is the frequency, what are the numbers
Yeah,
of
we
this
have records of
happening?
these things, yeah.
And-
We can get that for you.
Okay.
That'll be
And what are you guys doing about it? I mean, what has this?
We just talked about this recently, and I think our sense is that it's a greater issue because it's not just in Middlebury, and that maybe the state should be taking action on this and looking at the cause and what are some of the programs that can happen. Victor's got some comments.
yeah, I think you misunderstand why we invited you here. I mean, this issue probably was the one that prompted us, that we realized that the town does not have the resources to deal with these sort of social problems that we constantly face. Now, it may be that Middlebury is not unique. That's why you're a state legislator. we're suggesting that the state really is the place where this kind of, I think, statewide, in other words, we're talking to you about considering passing legislation and providing resources so that these issues can be addressed here, and perhaps in Virgins and Brandon and other towns. So that's our point. I mean, that's why.
I realize that, Victor.
All right,
So
well,
my question is, what the chief was saying was that this is a problem unique to Middlebury. And so I was trying to get an understanding of what he meant by that. And then second, to get an understanding of what he was saying about people are coming here because there are all these services, but what you're saying to us is there are not enough services. So that's a disconnect. That doesn't, so I'm trying to understand that.
They think there are services here. They think there are services in the state. Middlebury is a very nice town. Come here and so on. And I mean, you as a legislator, if I may instruct you, is to consider the needs of the state as they manifest themselves in the various communities. And in this case, Addison County, the town of Middlebury, and in the other towns, and so on. We have this social problem. It's a very serious problem. We don't like to lose people. I mean, there is a sense in which when you talk about homeless people, yes, they don't have a place that they can call their own. Some of them are mentally disturbed. Some of them are on drugs and so on and so forth. They have very serious problems, and one of the primary functions of government is the welfare of the people. That's all the people, not just the ones who happen to be enfranchised to vote.
So some of the things that we're doing, if I could just talk about what I can tell you that the chief mentioned mental illness and mental health issues, and that has been a problem statewide. It's a big one that we talk about every year. It's also takes a long time to get to the solutions because often what it means is more beds. And so we have actually put money into the capital budget. We did that when I was on my former committee, Corrections and Institutions, into the capital budget to increase the number of beds. The Brattleboro Retreat has agreed to add a whole wing that would start with adults, and then there would be something for kids. I mean, not minors, I guess. And Central Vermont Hospital is looking to expand. There's different levels of mental health, problems, and so we had the psychiatric hospital, which also needs more beds. We have a step-down facility we have to get out of because it was basically 2 trailers that we got money from FEMA, and we have to move into a better place, and we need more beds there. So we're sort of navigating the puzzle of where these beds are going to be and how many we need and what kind of services they need. So there's money that's been put in now. They still have to go through the regulatory process and then the construction process. So it's still going to be a couple more years before we have anything. But certainly the legislature is very well aware of the mental health issues. I'm just touching on one piece of it that I can be concrete about, but that's definitely a statewide issue.
Is the state legislature talking about resources toward training for law enforcement to just help them broaden their de-escalation strategies, perhaps? That could be one thing. I mean, and I think Chief Hanley is saying, is there something that we could locate in Addison County that's not only a screener, but a place that somebody could go for detox? That's not Porter Hospital, I guess.
Let's, I'm going to try to move on because we do have other things on the topic, but in trying to moderate, I think we owe you maybe some quantification, and we'll do that before we meet next time. We'll get that to you. And I think in quantifying it, it would be nice to quantify how much time away that means for us, and maybe some of the progressive steps to get to a solution. One of the things that Chief just brought up that we weren't necessarily aware of is a screener. Maybe some of the resources that we could get, at least start to be able to have our our local police engaging in local issues and not away from the community for extended periods of time. And so with that, we're going to move on.
I just want to say one more thing about the screener really quickly, and I'm wondering if that could be something that could be a county thing instead of just a Middlebury thing that people would pay for, and that maybe it's housed at the sheriff's office, for example, because that's the countywide law enforcement. So maybe there's a way for all the communities to pitch in and help pay for a screener.
Yeah, Addison County is usually not the only county that doesn't have something. We're actually usually the county that's doing stuff really, really well. So that surprises me that we're the only county without a screener. And so I'm wondering, what are the reasons for that? And there might be some local reasons if every other county has one. So
Yeah, it
if
could
you,
be a
if you all could do a
prioritization
little
and-
bit more research on that particular topic, and then if there's something we can do to help you with it, certainly we can, but that surprises me. I mean, really, we're usually the county that does things really well.
And one of the things that we talked about is we're told that the state local option tax fund has a surplus now, and that maybe some of those funds could be returned to the communities for some of these social services and help with homelessness. And since you're on the Ways and Means,
I know, I've made a note to
that's a plug.
check that out.
Okay, so
I don't know whether it's all fully funded. Anyway, I will learn more and
There are a
find
couple
out.
of people that did come tonight that wanted to speak to the issue that are in the audience. If we could just give, I know you want to move on because we have other issues, but do you mind if we just give a minute? Did you want to say something, Randy?
I can literally do this in 2 minutes. I mean, this is the perfect time because much of what is context for what
Would you want to come up to the microphone
Yep.
for our folks at home?
has been said. I thank you so much for doing that. So let me explain who I am. I'm Randy Krakowski. My wife and I own an apartment building, which we might live in someday here in town. It's the yellow place right next to Charter House. And we also live out in the country, 10 miles south of here. And at both places, ironically, we see all of the problems that Chief Hanley is discussing. And it has become evident to us, and sitting here tonight really drove it home, and I'm sure it's evident to you, that even the best intentioned of us have only, like the people touching the elephant, a hint of what the whole problem is. Some people are seeing the trunk and some people are seeing the leg. So what we did in this brief memo is ask that the select board consider creating, and Chief is probably going to cringe, creating a task force that's really going to be listened to try to sum up what the dimensions of the problem are, because I think most of us sitting in the room really don't understand all of the dimensions. And I think if we involved the police, the caregivers in town, and the homeless in the task force so that they can be heard, as diverse as they are, I think we might come up with an Addison County appropriate approach for very short-term actions that can be taken, intermediate-term actions, and that may be 3-4 years over the horizon with more beds, and long-term solutions that the state can take, and we might need to talk to our national representatives. I'll just say that I have a sister who teaches social work in Phoenix, Arizona, and when I talked to her on the phone recently, she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "It's really tough times up here right now." She said, in Phoenix, Arizona, we're seeing people leave and going to rural areas all across the United States. And she said there are two things that are attracting them. Nice people there at the other end. San Francisco's had the same problem for decades. And she said, marijuana laws. She said, I'm totally in support of decriminalizing it. But she said, start putting all these pieces together, and you have to understand you're creating a magnet. So we need to understand what that magnet is, not just from our perspective, being the people who treat the symptoms at the end, but we need to talk to the people who are coming here and find out, why are they coming? What are they coming for? Are we meeting their needs? How can we better meet their needs? How can we afford to meet their needs with the resources that we have, as meager as they are? I'd love to be on this kind of a task force, so thank you for indulging me.
thank you.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'm going to move on, and our intent was to broach the subject with you, not to lecture you on it, and we appreciate you listening to us and with our concern, and we will do some more backgrounding and get some data for you.
Can I say something encouraging, very brief? We lacked a special investigation unit for years, and we're able to work with state and other agencies together and create a special investigation unit. So if we're lacking a screener, I don't want to be too fixed on that as a quote-unquote answer. But if there's a precedent for us to look for a resource and build a facility or a capacity.
No, and I think we'll make, now that it's raised to the level of us talking about it, I think we'll make some progress. One of the issues that we have, the state is not making progress on, the nation is not making progress on, is health insurance, and it's starting to really double down at the municipal level as our contracted health insurance with our employees, high double-digit increases year after year, and it's something that it would be really nice if the state could look at something, at least pooling all of the communities, and VLCT's got some stuff, but I don't know, we're not making any progress on, doesn't seem, and that's something we want to make sure we put a plea in, that we've got to make some progress there.
Is your health insurance pooled with VLCT? It's not, are you?
We are a small town, small employer of 50 people, and so we're in the health exchange.
Okay.
We had been with one of the association plans, which was not allowed to continue under federal regulations. So now we're back in the health exchange this year, experiencing a 16% increase in health insurance premiums.
So, I know enough to be dangerous here, but I do know that there's been a lot of cost shifting going on, and the recipient of the increased costs are the private insurance carriers. I mean, so that's where we're feeling it. The federal government has not increased Medicare and Medicaid rates. The state has not increased the amount that it would take from its general fund to apply to Medicaid. And so what gets squeezed, the only place the money can come from, ends up being the commercial carriers. I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just trying to explain there's this sort of cost shifting thing that's going on, and I have to pay it too. I pay 100% of my health insurance for me, so I feel the pain personally. I think it's something that we're pretty aware of, and it's a difficult situation.
Well, it's
Not easy
starting to, it's gonna start crushing all taxpayers, and
That's right.
it's crushing small businesses in the state too.
Great. Our total healthcare spending in the state's roughly $6 billion, and the entire state budget is $6 billion. So it's a vast expense that we all wrestle with in one way or another.
Right. And I know we've tried some things, and it's not news to you, but maybe as you start seeing, if we were to go back just 3 years with those, and then look at that compounded increases, what's that percentage, and what's that taking out of our ability to do other things, some of the infrastructure and other things that are really near and dear to us in the community, and to keeping the community vibrant for many years. And then when you stop being able to invest into those things because all your budget's going towards healthcare, it's going to have an impact.
Do you happen to know the percentage of the town's budget that is dedicated to providing healthcare benefits to your employees and staff?
Our general fund budget's about $11 million, and our health insurance budget's about $800,000.
Okay, thank you.
That's a lot.
So one of this is not in my area of jurisdiction in either of my committees, but after getting the email from Kathleen, I had several conversations with colleagues to try to figure out, is there what's cooking, basically. And one of the things I think that's a concern right now is we have this accountable care organization that's relatively new, and there was a great hope that that would reduce costs. And it's only in the 4th year, so it's hard to tell yet, but right now we have not seen that as a successful means for reducing healthcare costs across the state. So I think that there'll be some, at least a focus on trying to figure out whether that is being successful, and if it's not, how can we make it more successful? I think that will be a focus of the healthcare committees will be taking a look at that. The other thing that I don't know the results of, but there was a statewide negotiation on teachers' health insurance for school districts, and I think they're in the final phases. Yeah, they haven't finalized that, but that will be interesting to see what they were able to accomplish, if anything, in terms of reducing the rates, and that might be an indication for the broader picture, particularly as relevant to municipalities. So I know that we're very aware of this issue, and also, as you all know, the federal government plays a big role in this, and right now nothing's really happening there with this. So, but I appreciate that you brought this up, and I have talked to our leadership and cited the increase that you did. So I will try to keep an eye on it for you and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Next is an update on the status of the Route 7 Exchange Street roundabout. Maybe that'd be something that you could shoot us an email once you get a chance to look into it, but we're very interested in trying to see some sort of progress in that. With a couple chair committees in the local community, I think maybe you could swap with your fellow chair committees and get them to prioritize that and move it up, at least get it on the 5-year plan. As far as we were last told, it wasn't even planned yet, so.
Have you talked to
Yes.
V-Trans?
Have we talked
Have you
to
talked to V-Trans about
We
this?
don't, no, we don't have a direct report from V-Trans, but the last one was, and last year, and when we talked about it, they came back and it wasn't programmed yet.
They were here yesterday. Did any of you meet with them?
I was tied up.
So, I thought that they got as far as doing an engineering study. 'Cause
They
I've
did,
been
and there's an apportioned,
nudging them for
Yeah.
years, and they said, well, we're doing the engineering study. And then the last session when I checked in on this, and actually, again, just before we adjourned, thinking ahead a little to like a meeting like this, and I talked to Senator Mazza. I said, so what's going on? He said, well, in part that it's the railway project is taking a lot of the sort of oxygen out of the room, and V-Trans is not, thinking about another, at that point, he said, he wasn't being formal about it, but they weren't putting the resources and time into scheduling Exchange Street. And I told them the same story about how there's more and more traffic through that, and it's a dangerous curve, lots of people accelerating out of town, and it seems an unsafe situation to continue. So I'd be happy to call him again and try to light a fire.
yeah, I'd appreciate it. I think we all would. And maybe once you're in session, it's worth me coming over and we meet with a few of them and explain how critical that is to the continued growth of Middlebury, because we're at the point now where new businesses on Exchange Street will start having to pay for that, and it's not built yet, not even programmed, and so I don't think people mind paying for something that they know is gonna be built in 5-7 years, whatever. But given understanding of the way they plan, even if they were to start looking at it now, it's at least 5 years out.
What do you mean they will be having to pay for it? What do you mean?
So it looks like I'm gonna be the first recipient of a bill on that, because we're building a new office building for Bees Rap and Vita down on Exchange. And part of the Act 250 permit is a fee for per car count coming out of there. going through that interchange, and yet the interchange has got no improvements, so
Is this specific to that one location, or is this a more general thing?
it's anybody on Exchange Street.
Ah,
Any
interesting.
development down there now, that was part of that engineering study and the finding. And so we don't mind paying for it, we'd like to know that it's gonna get built some point.
I think it's,
And how much each business has to pay?
It's not the businesses that exist, it's
Yeah,
new,
the
any,
new
new-
developers,
any
yeah.
new businesses, and it's based on a car count.
Based on the car count.
Maybe I just misunderstood. I thought that when V-Trans committed to the engineering study, that was, putting you onto the 5-year timeline, like engineering study, follow-up, implementation.
We had hoped, but when I asked Adam Luigi for the last update, it was not in the 5-year plan yet.
Including the Addison
Yeah.
County Regional Planning Commission's own 5-year.
Well, I think there was a top priority of theirs, but it was not in the state's 5-year plan.
all right, I will follow up on that too with
Yeah.
Kurt. I thought it was.
We
in
actually
the-
even had a situation that's going back, I think it's, Amy, you as your first,
Yeah,
you're probably your first year.
yeah, and
Can't
Betty and I
remember
met with you and V-Trans and,
Right.
right, we did.
And one of the aspects, this was also tied into growth on under Act 250. So we thought we were coming against a situation where we would bump into a scenario where we couldn't have continued growth until that was built under 250. And it seems like we got sort of an exception to that current, with the understanding that it's in the pipeline now. What that pipeline looks like is, I think, the question we're asking.
Right. I see that,
Okay. So
we'll follow up on that.
The next one on there, the school, Route 7 exchange, or no, the school corridor. That one is more personally visible to me, because I have kids. And that one, I'm just wondering, I know there was that study that we did at one point. I was still on the school board at that point. Has there been any movement since then?
Are you referring to the Charles Avenue?
Yes, is that what this is referring to, or is this something
No.
different? This is different. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What is this?
Well,
the
the-
school-
you mean that there was an,
Corridor.
right, so Heather's talking about the intersection of Monroe and
Charles,
Charles. So
yes.
that study was done, but we're talking about the whole corridor.
Whole corridor.
And how that could be redesigned as it gets repaved so that it's.
Is it on the list for repavement? Have you been
Yes.
notified?
Yes.
And when is that?
Well, we hope that
It's 20.
it's 2021.
2021. So we need the planning now, and
Okay.
we want to plan it as a multi-use road.
Yeah. If you look in on the Exchange Street one, I'll look on this one, because this one I know more about, because I was involved in that study. And I also know, having sort of participated a little bit in your Planapalooza, this one was a thing that had a lot of red dots along that Route 7 corridor.
It did.
And as a school board member, I got tons of complaints from parents about that area. So that one, there maybe, as an education committee member, I could also,
Yep.
play the school card.
Well, there's no doubt you have knowledge of it.
Yeah, I know
I
more
mean,
about this one, so.
We also
do you
looked at Creek Road, and we thought about anchoring Creek and Exchange Street with rotaries, and that would calm traffic through the whole corridor. So it wouldn't only help Exchange Street having that rotary, it would really help all of Route 7 in that
Right.
zone.
Well, and also bumping out the crosswalks, that's something that other towns have done to slow traffic and make the crosswalks skinnier, or, you know what I mean, less. Shorter, thank you.
And we have to
yeah.
find a place where the bikes can go. So-
Yes, that was pretty clear, from the Planapalooza thing too, was.
So I just would caution that the condition of the pavement, as I'm sure you all are aware, is
Dire.
we are in over the 10-year limit of the paving, and the rail bridge project has extended that, the state coming in and helping us with that repaving. And while we need to look at safety issues, I don't want to delay the paving project, because it's already been delayed long enough, and the condition of the pavement is beyond what our town staff can do to repair it.
Yeah.
We're also trying to plan a major water system upgrade in coordination with that paving project. So while I want to do safety corridor, I don't want to delay the paving.
And you said 2021 or 22?
21.
Okay.
It was initially discussed for the spring, and now we've been told fall. And I'm really, really hoping that that doesn't get pushed to the spring of 2022, because I don't think the condition of our pavement can last that long.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do anything that causes any
Yeah, I
more
hear you.
delay.
Do you have information that you could forward me on this so that any information you've received from the state?
Wasn't
Thank
there a
you.
study of the rotary to rotary idea of
Yeah.
the traffic circle
Yeah.
to
Was
traffic?
it that?
I'm not sure.
I remember
Regional
seeing that
planning may
drawn
have
up.
that.
Was that regional planning?
You could check with that.
Okay.
It's not anything I do,
Okay.
There was a study about a rotary at the Charles Avenue, Monroe.
Well, and that was decided to be, the final
Yeah,
design of that
abandoned
was a,
to just move the Charles Avenue.
to align the intersections,
Yeah.
so we had a
Mhm.
aligned intersection and not a rotary right there.
Correct, right.
I think it's possible to pave, Heather, and still do some striping improvements and accomplish.
Yeah, it's cheaper to do it all at once, so we can make the
The safety.
efficiency argument. So I'll see what I can find. If you can send me what you have, Kathleen, I'll
The 125, we'd sent a letter, and I think they were gonna be, they'd committed some, to look at, striping changes, and remind me, Kathleen, what they committed to.
So this is Route 125 west of town. I think this may have come up last when you were here previously. So there was going to be some investigation by the state about possible improvements there, low-cost improvements, and that's still underway. I think one thing that was mentioned was doing the rumble strip down the center of the road.
Yeah, I reached out to them after we met last year, and that, they told me they were going to do some, that, like you described, so, but that, you haven't.
We hadn't seen it yet, no.
Haven't seen it
So
yet.
there was a few more, lower cost things that could have some significant improvements in the safety of that. That rumble strip in the center, inform the drivers that when they're getting near the center line, and we thought that would be implemented fairly soon. And so if there's any way to make sure that that doesn't fall off the table. If it takes the squeaky wheel, we'd like to be the squeaky wheel.
So I'm remembering we also had a tour of V-Trans came out, and we drove on the road and stuff, and thinking that that was a stretch of road from the college through like the James Road blinker, that the condition was really, it was in really rough shape, and they said, well, we can do temporary paving, which I think, so it's been repaved, but I'm also thinking, I remember them saying, this is a road, kind of like what they did on Route 17 from New Haven Junction going west, where they have to go completely down to base all over again, like 3 or 4 feet down, and rebuild the road, and they weren't able to schedule that kind of thorough rebuild yet. I don't know if there's.
That tracks with what they told us. The thorough rebuild was longer term, but there was some short-term agreements that we made, and I thought we had accepted, and we were looking for making sure that they don't get forgotten. And the last thing on our list was the Vermont Climate Solutions Caucus. I'm not sure. Can someone speak to that?
Well, you already did
Did.
speak to it, but the one thing we have before us right now is a huge solar project. So we're, of course, in the crosshairs of trying to determine the appropriate siting for that, because it's a very large one. And I think that goes back to the types of projects that can be permitted right now, either really, really big or rooftop and nothing in between. So that leaves a developer like Encore looking for a potential customer and location, and we're it. And the college is hoping to benefit from that. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can do to address that, except just to be informed about that and our dilemma.
Can you describe that a little more? Because we passed Act 177, the energy siting bill, 3 years ago, and it was designed to give municipalities control. If a town went through and created a formal energy element that was approved by their RPC, that in PUC proceedings you'd be given substantial deference rather than due consideration. And it was basically, if a town had sort of stepped up with a vision of how to get to 90 by 2050, that the town's version of how to get there would become the more forceful planning document. Do you not have
We don't
quote-unquote
have
preferred
that.
locations?
No,
Have you
it's
done-
called the Enhanced Energy Plan, and we don't have that.
Okay.
So we have our planning commission looking at this project and just reflecting on its issues, and we'll bring that to the developer, and we're just checking with the developer to be sure that they have done diligence in looking at all the other sites that they've, well, they have looked at other sites, but, should we be revisiting any one of those sites instead of this one, given the pushback we're having right now on it, because it's such a precious visual shed.
So this
Or
is-
you said something about they're only doing really, really big ones or rooftops and nothing in between. Tell me more,
I think,
sounds like, is that right?
Well, no, it depends, there are different programs, but for net metering, which is the most popular program, there are something like 15,000 net metering sites in the state. So, right, it's true that the most numerous by far are the rooftop or backyard, and then there are, but they can go all the way up to 500 kilowatts, which is probably,
That's what this one is.
and
this is 5
the
megawatts.
permitting gets more rigorous the larger it gets. And then beyond that, outside of net metering, there are standard offer programs, and actually we have a bill we're looking at for 2 years now, where developers need to say, yes, they want to do it, but it's to help people get up to 5 megawatts. So we're trying to create programs that slot into the scale of town and individual interests. So this is, but I thought the Encore project I heard about was far too large to be net metering. It was like
Right, it's not net.
5 megawatts.
It's 5 megawatts.
5
5
megawatts, yeah.
Right.
And that's the maximum, I think, for the state.
And how much space do they need for 5 megawatts?
32 acres,
37 acres.
something like
37
that,
acres, okay.
37
Big.
acres.
It's a big development.
And so there's informal pushback, it's being discussed and the planning commission's
The
getting
pushback is from the
resistance?
neighbors,
Yeah.
because South Street Extension is a very scenic road, and the neighbors are complaining that they should find a different location.
Well, it's not only neighbors, I think it's many people who.
And recreational users of that.
It's a very scenic
Yeah.
area that many people who jog or, it's probably one of the most traveled roads on foot in town, but it is a place to go if you want to enjoy a kind of idyllic view,
Is-
these are obviously critical issues having to do with the environment, how these decisions are made community-wide. I think some of the criticism of the college's plan is that they really didn't consult the community. And it's the need, I think, of communities developing ways in which they're going to deal with probably is the greatest existential crisis that
Sure.
we're facing. Global warming is a very serious threat, and it needs to be we're not going to change it, make it go away, but we're going to enable us to live with it with a minimum of suffering.
Right.
And I think that's
And this is college-owned college-owned land.
It is.
It
It's
is.
the college's own plan, yes.
Yeah, and we're working through it at the town level first. But I think there is a concern that, we've got a siting plan, but it's probably not to the level that qualifies us to have preferred sites yet or anything like that.
I would encourage the town to do an energy plan, and the siting plan, so that we could get that substantial deference from the PUC. I also think Green Mountain Power is struggling with these projects coming online, and they've put the brakes on a little bit they've asked the PUC to slow down because they're seeing an increase in these, and we're grappling with the issue at all levels, because we know we need this, but how do we do it in an equitable way? And these large-scale net metered projects are quite costly to the average, they can be costly to the average consumer. So I know that's on our radar to address at that level, but I do think that what the town can do is create that local energy plan, the siting plan, and be more proactive in saying, here's where we want to have it. And that would engage the citizens in that conversation before the development is proposed.
And your RPC has become certified, so the county energy plan is a certified plan. And now, because of that, they are able to review municipal plans to give them that certification as well. So there is local expertise you could draw on. There were state funds, $300,000 a year, 3 years running, awarded to department, VLCT, in order to go and do outreach, basically training municipalities and RPCs to create such plans. The hope was that 3 years of funding would be enough, because they might become, one towns might become a template for another, and editing a plan would be easier than creating from scratch. So I don't know if there's a shortage of technical assistance available to the town
So I understand that Leicester just adopted enhanced energy plan, so there's a local template that was developed in cooperation with the RPC.
Yay, Lester, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I know we're at the end of the list. Can I just make one comment?
Sure.
Ruth, did you talk about the carbon credits? Or,
The forest carbon
Yeah.
credits, yes.
so I don't know a lot about this, so that may be reflected in my question, but why wouldn't we keep our own carbon credits? I know it could potentially be an income source, and we're always looking for the last person to say we don't turn down income, but maybe we should keep them for ourselves. Are we looking at that?
So, yeah, the study committee is looking at lots of different options. One of the things that other states that have tried to do internal markets haven't been successful with it, because there's just not enough demand within the state. The only state that's been able to do it is California, but they have the 7th largest economy in the world.
Right.
So they have the California compliance market is the one that gives you the biggest bang for your buck. Those are the highest selling credits. So, but there is this question of double counting, and right now the state doesn't have a carbon accounting system. So nobody's counting our carbon on a statewide basis at this point. So if we do pass a legislation that leads us to counting carbon, your question would absolutely be, we wouldn't want to sell them out of state, because we'd want to count them for our own accounting. And we address that in our work. But until we get to that point, this is a potential revenue source, and more importantly, from my perspective, is that it's a potential way for maintaining forest land if it's done properly. And there are the whole system is very, there's lots of verification levels to it. So whether or not municipal forests would even qualify is certainly a question. But one of the things we're looking at is could it be possible to aggregate municipal forests together and help them be able to get into a market like this and get some local revenue for municipal forests on top of what you may already be getting from your municipal forests. It may not be possible. The answer might be it's not doable, or it's not worth it because it's quite a bit of work, but yeah.
Okay.
But I'm happy to talk to you a lot more about it, and the report will be out in a couple of months, probably early January.
Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I'll take you off the hot seat.
Can I
Chris,
ask?
did you have something quick?
Well, yeah, it's very short. So last year, we talked about this promising idea of 10 pilot towns going ahead and having the ability to do more without going back and getting charter changes. You're going to have more flexibility to manage your own affairs. And it came out of government operations, in which was my afternoon committee, in a favorable way, but we ran aground after our committee. So to the extent that you lobby your legislature, I think if it would be helpful, probably to go on the record asking to have that move forward. I don't know if, I don't remember if that's what S54 is all about in your packet up there.
That's cannabis.
That's what?
Cannabis.
That's tax and regulate.
The tax
Yes.
rate, okay.
That said, we were anxious to be one of the townships that threw in for that. So you could read that to be that we're in favor of that, and we would enjoy being a pilot town.
So I'll talk to the chair, who will have a best sense of, there's just a tremendous inherent reluctance on the part of the legislature to let towns manage their own charter change, be given more latitude. It's just a long-standing tradition. So I'll check in and see if there's a way that it might be modified and moved again, something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your personal schedules when you're out of session to come in and spend some time with us and have a little bit of, we get a sense with what's going on in your area and hopefully provide you some things that are of concern from your shire town here. So, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for all you guys are doing here, too.
Thanks, Rob. Get better.
Did Doug not come this evening?
He checked in with me this afternoon and asked me if it was necessary for him to be here. I said he was welcome, but it wasn't necessary
Okay.
that he come.
So, I guess Doug's not here. That said, we kind of heard from him 2 times already. So the next item on our list is to discuss Doug Lazarus' exterior historical display panel project proposal that he provided us. We've gone through a process where we kind of learned what he was proposing, understood what how that applied to our town prioritization, and we asked Kathleen to create a matrix. We all voted on the matrix, and I don't know if the matrix made it into, did it make it into the packet?
It's in your
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And it's on the packet right at the top of the Lazarus section.
Yes, so, my observation is that the project doesn't meet the criteria to a substantial amount, and it wouldn't be a priority for us for this year. And so, if I could make a suggestion, is that we talk about, Lindsay had made a comment last week in our meeting that maybe we should be talking about having our arts committee. That said, I think we have implied and taken action to try to grow our arts within the town with the display outside the town offices. And while we aren't willing to dedicate the resources at the town level to this project, which is primarily on private property, perhaps it would be something that we would be interested in making a statement that we support the idea of such a project, and ask Kathleen to draft a letter, maybe, and pass on to Doug that, given that it's on private property, that we feel that that's something that should be done independent of town governance.
Letter of support.
Basically, yes. I mean, that's just an idea, a thought.
No other involvement of the town.
But no involvement for the town to take,
I agree.
for the town to take a position that we're going to support with resources, both financial and staff time, on a project that hasn't gone through, number one, the process, hasn't gone through committee. We haven't involved the public in defining how the project's gonna look, what are the subject matters, who is the artist. There's a lot of different things. We would be setting a pretty significant precedent in this case. That said, I think we're in support of the arts, and we would like to see more of this type of stuff. And if it's something that he can pull off, if he would like to fundraise and get the support of those private property owners that he's proposing to install the art on, I don't see why we would be against it.
Well, the only thing that we would have to be careful about is the balance of the individuals, because he's talking about historical figures, and that could come back to reflect on the town, where you could have somebody upset, like, oh, this person isn't included. So I think he's giving us an opportunity to respond too, even though it's private property, because it will reflect back on Middlebury.
Are you talking about the subject of the portraits?
Yes.
Yeah, if the town gets involved, I don't know how somebody can come up with a name without having a public process. I think the town people should decide who should be on the portrait, if it's a town project. If it's a private project, then they can do whatever they want, I guess.
I know what you're saying, but even so, I mean, could you imagine if he is successful and that somebody comes and looks at the town and says, oh, how come you have these people and not these other people as portraits on these buildings? I'm just saying, when you start to do it with people like that, it can be sensitive, and I think we're being given an opportunity to watch for that, for balance.
Well, I think, I think Doug Lazarus had a good idea, at least partial, although I don't think he quite thought it through. Middlebury, I think, needs to celebrate its past more, and I'm thinking about the fact that, after all, Emma Willard was here. That's where women's higher education got started. And the Republican Party, when it used to be against slavery, I suspect the current one might want to reinstitute it, but that was the party of Lincoln. And if my historical facts are accurate enough, I believe someone from Middlebury nominated Lincoln at the 1860 Republican Convention. There are these very, I think, significant and iconic moments in our history. And we have, of course, the Sheldon Museum. You can find out an awful lot about that. But I suspect, Lindsay was talking about an art and public places committee. It could very well be that really this is a function of the Planning Commission in a way. That this is one of the concerns that a town planner might have, is how do we signify the distinctness of this town? And I'm very proud of sort of being a citizen of this town in part for its past, for these really great moments that I mean, why not have Welcome to Middlebury, where women's higher education was invented? I mean, that would be, but how it's done, I don't know, and it would have to be carefully done. And
Right, that's all I'm saying, and that's what an arts council would
yeah,
review.
well, I don't think it should be
Or committee.
contemporaries. I mean, I think it should be, we should
And-
celebrate the dead in that respect.
And there might be some people who would say, I don't want to see anything. Why are you imposing these huge portraits on me while I'm driving downtown? So
Well,
how do you,
That's,
Be- just
yeah.
because we like art doesn't mean that somebody else, that's why we don't have billboards, right? So people don't
Yes.
want to see that, and you're imposing that, these big portraits on the side of the buildings, and some people might not like it.
You're right, exactly right.
If it's a town project, I'm talking about, if it's a town
Okay.
project, then the town is responsible to go through this process.
Well, I don't think it's a town project,
It is
based,
not, so-
you know, we asked everyone to score it, and the scoring does not support it being a town
Exactly.
project.
Yeah.
The question is, do we want to take any action, or do you want to let it
I'll be
die?
okay with a letter of support, and he's a good artist, and
It feels like we've already given him our support, you know, vocally at a couple of meetings. I'm not sure that we do need to compose a letter. Just, you know, get back to him that, you know, we've
Okay.
done this
Mhm.
vetting, and thank you.
I do think that when we do, that this needs to be a placeholder, Kathleen, for our next retreat to, or before we do our committee formation, is this a priority to establish an arts council or arts committee, or whatever we want to call it, that seeks to promote a growth of art display or opportunities for artists, et cetera?
Irrespective of this particular project, what I do like, though, is the fact this is was a chance for us to
Test that, I was
test
gonna
this
say that
whole
too.
methodology. And I especially appreciate the part of, what really set it for me was when you put the numbers in there as far as time. So that gave us a chance to objectively go through the process, and I'm really pleased with the way that we were able to do that in an objective manner.
Okay.
Going forward, the only thing I would change next time is to have other candidates side by side, other candidate projects side by side, just for reference to see what else is on the plate. Didn't have time to do that for this particular one.
How much
Okay.
time did you take to prepare this? That's one thing, because you gave the numbers of what it was gonna take going forward. What did it take you to get to this?
Chris English did a lot of the work
Well, I
for
think
this.
what I meant to say you is
So probably
collectively.
3 hours for me and 5 or 6 hours for Chris.
so we
That's
already-
conservative. They've probably got at least 10 hours in this review, so. But it's one of those things where,
We were
you
testing.
know, it was the first time we've
process.
actually formally done it. We probably should have started immediately going into this and seeing how the concept, before we devote that initial 10 hours of staff time.
Yeah.
So, lesson learned.
Lesson learned. What a good one.
Laura, check warrants.
I've reviewed them. They're in good order. So I move that we approve the total expenditures in the amount of $202,825.18. It's all expenditures this time because we're in the short week. So this is for the period November 13th to November 19th tonight.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Kathleen.
So first up, draft town college lunch agenda for Friday, December 13th is in your packet. Don't know if anyone has anything to add. You will have another meeting before that, but you may, that's your meeting December 10th is next. Didn't know if you wanted to select a third member or to see how the agenda presents itself.
Pleasure of the board.
Where are we in the rotation?
If you go back to last week's packet,
Okay,
we have, I think it was titled Attendance at Town College Lunches, or, let me see.
Seems like in looking at the issues, which is the priority of who's that third person, but then also the timing, seems like Victor's probably the right one for this time.
and how did you get to that? Because I thought, well, you have economic health and the downtown master plan. How did you come to Victor being the candidate?
Well, also college relations is his experience with the college over time in history. And they seem like he could speak to a number of those, as well as just to continue that personal dialogue that he uniquely has.
Kathleen, did Sue get back to you, or did they have anything to add to this agenda?
I forwarded it to them, and they have not returned any comments.
Just,
And it's on December 13th, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How's everybody's calendar look for the 13th? Is everybody a potential player on that?
Yeah, I'm open.
Are you, you're gonna be able to make it, right?
I have it on my
We
calendar.
put it on our calendar,
Yep.
right? Yeah. I'd like to see what the college might wanna add to it before we select the final member. Just 'cause, a lot of this is the same stuff we talked about. Are we gonna have, the report, a draft report of the downtown master plan we could share with them? Cause I'm not sure, I did see Matt at the out brief, but,
So we'll have, probably can get the PowerPoint that was shown at the closeout, which would be really excellent to have.
yeah.
I'll put that up on the website, and also for anyone that missed it, it's on MCTV, and the recording came out really well.
That could be a sort of a memo to the colleges, ask if they had a chance to look at it in advance, because that may lend itself to a series of questions and dialogue.
Yeah, any other comments on the meeting? Did anything come up in your minds as far as things we would want to add to the agenda?
I don't know if we want to talk about the vagrancy issue with them, because they're dealing with vagrancy on their own campus.
Are there?
They are. I'm not sure that it's outsiders as much as the student body, but I just saw their Middlebury News campus
Ah.
lead story
When we say,
on that.
when we say vagrancy, is it automatically associated with homelessness, or how do, it sounds like a very demeaning term when we talk about homeless people.
Okay, maybe it's not that, but maybe it's the inebriation problem.
Yeah, but
No,
I just want to make sure that when we
Mhm.
talk about the homeless issue and we throw in the word vagrant, it's,
Mhm.
to me, if I was a homeless person, it's demeaning to me.
I
And
hear
I think
you.
we should be careful how we address, most of the people that I know who are on the homeless system, It's not their choice. It's just misfortune of being a homeless person, right? So, it just, whenever I hear the term vagrancy, it just something clicks in me.
Well, I think that's again going back to, and it set the stage for me with that one meeting we had with the public safety where Chief Hanley
Yep.
made those three clear delineations. And as you say, homeless is a variety of factors that lead to that, but these are people who ultimately want to be productive members of society. And so, and that's, they're by and large not a harmful bunch. It's this group that's more of a transient group that, whatever that term is. But,
So if I could just make one comment on the proposed agenda, I'm not sure that there's really, like, I feel like a whole lot of urgency on the Economic Health Committee, but I felt like maybe moving the Energy 2028, like,
The
I
solar,
think I would just maybe rearrange the numbers of what's there and,
To make sure we cover it thoroughly
Yeah.
before it gets.
like, I feel like that is a higher priority, maybe even more so than downtown. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with what's there, just maybe the order that we covered it, that's would be my only suggestion.
So I could work with the order and maybe some of these things that are less urgent or just a short update, I could do an update in advance and provide that.
That's a good idea. You've done that previously, and as we get short on time, at least that gives them a sense.
The only other thing, but again, given the time and some of the importance of other things on this, I don't know that it needs to be really covered right now, but I am just a little curious on the college's thoughts on Creek Road and anything they might wanna add to that conversation. But again, priority-wise, I don't think it's a, Anyway.
Is that an 8?
just at some point,
Okay.
as that conversation develops.
All right, so we'll look to hear back from the college, hopefully before our next meeting, and we'll finalize it. If you could hold the 13th open. Communications, current correspondence, anything?
Just a couple of things to add. Added the Planapalooza on MCTV. And we also received a letter from Neighbors Together urging businesses and local people to give Middlebury money as a gift this holiday season to support the downtown and Middlebury economy in general.
I do that.
Knew you did. So tell us what we don't know.
And also, people may have noticed we have the new sound system, and we also have assisted living, I always say that, assisted listening devices.
That's me, that's what I would say.
We have 4 of these, expandable to 12, and they work really well.
Awesome. The sound system does seem to be better.
No, I haven't, I mean, I've got my things in, but maybe I can take one home.
Okay, board member concerns. Farhad?
the sound system is great. And one of the updates at the MCTV last meeting was pretty soon we'll have live YouTube feed. So people who don't, right now, we have to have a Comcast to watch these. And very, very soon we'll have live, so anybody with a web browser can get on YouTube and watch the meetings live, which is great. The other thing, I wanted to put my 2 cents in earlier when the legislators were here about, Ruth had asked about what's unique about Middlebury, why do we have this problem? And I think Chief was very clear in answering that question about just one example of the screener not having. Imagine how many officer hours are being wasted and how much we can save. and direct those resources to the stuff we need to do. I think that's just one of the examples, I think, and we should take note of that. And I don't know why it was discontinued, but can we kickstart it again through the legislature? I think they should do it.
I think one big key thing there too is a place in Addison County so that our officers do not have to travel and be out of service for 6 and 8 hours. You know, I mean, I really think we need a county facility for, but anyway.
Yeah.
I agree.
If we could just cut the time down is the
Yeah.
biggest thing. What are some of those actions that we can take?
I wonder how many officer hours are used a month?
That's what we're
Just
gonna
transport
try to quantify.
Try to quantify, it's a lot though. Yeah.
Victor?
I have a concern that was brought to me by a citizen. It may not be a concern any longer. This has to do with the new sidewalk that was put around Seymour Street, Pulp Mill Bridge, and so on. And this person was concerned about the fact that after the snow, the Middlebury part of the sidewalk was plowed and the Weybridge was not. And it was his understanding, and I said I wasn't sure, that the town of Middlebury was going to plow the whole thing. Now, I was driving on Pulp Mill Bridge Road the other day, just this morning, I think it was, and I noticed that, in fact, it had been plowed. So the whole thing is now plowed. Now,
And salted.
who's doing it? Is the town doing it?
So we're working with Weybridge on that. We had asked Weybridge to secure a private contractor to do that work so that we could focus on Middlebury sidewalks. They were not able to identify anyone, so we helped them out this time, and we'll continue to work with them toward a resolution for this year.
So was there an agreement between Middlebury and Weybridge that we are going to plow their sidewalks?
I
No.
thought there was.
That was the discussion I saw on Front Porch Forum, that first there was a discussion that that side is not plowed, this side is plowed very well. But then somebody commented today, I think, saying that actually Middlebury has a contract that they will clear and now it is clear.
There isn't
so-
an agreement in place,
No.
There
Okay.
is.
so we're working on it.
Oh.
I mean, I certainly hope it can be kept open, because
Yeah.
it is a great benefit for so many people use that.
Loop.
We're walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it was always there.
Yeah.
If people
yeah,
were just walking in the road,
yeah,
and
yeah,
certainly want to maintain that.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay. Heather?
So a couple of quick things. I noticed that the BMP was looking for donations to support Very Merry Middlebury. And I'm not quite sure, didn't have a chance to look into the funding, but if there's anything private individuals can do to help support that effort, I would ask them to do it. And I think maybe as part of our budgeting conversation, we should maybe try to, I thought that was kind of all supported by the downtown improvement, or some of it was supported by the downtown improvement, the DIDC?
Right, so a BMP is funded by $25,000 from the general fund, $10,000 from the DIDC for the marketing position, and $5,000 for support of the BMP in general.
Okay.
So that's where the majority of their money comes from, and they're also receiving some funding from the Vermont Agency of Transportation Marketing Grant.
Related to the rail bridge project, right.
Related to the railroad project.
So, I guess
So that was going to be one of the focuses of this year's budget review for agencies. BMP hasn't had an in-depth review in several years, so that is going to be on our plate.
Okay, so, So I guess I was a little surprised, but if they need the money to pull off this very merry Middlebury and people are able to help support it, I would encourage them to. I saw a post that, a private individual had made a considerable contribution if we were able to match it, so let's hope that we can step up and do that. And then I just wanted to give you all a quick update. The Creek Road Task Force met on last Friday, and we actually had a surprising breakthrough that I was not anticipating. So, I know Kathleen had emailed me earlier asking about schedule, and I had originally hoped we could come up with a recommendation by December. I don't think we'll quite hit that. Our next meeting is the 5th of December. But I was hopeful maybe we could have a recommendation to the infrastructure committee, maybe for the January infrastructure committee meeting. But again, depending on how much we're able to meet in December, that may still be cutting. But I just wanted to give you guys an update and let you know we are meeting again on the 5th of December if anyone's interested or.
Super.
Okay.
Good news. Laura?
I'm really encouraged by the attendance we've had at our recent select board meetings. I just really thank those that have come tonight and at our last select board meeting. It really is wonderful to have that participation at our local level, important, in fact. So thank you and keep coming. I also wanted to let you know that you'll have an opportunity to stop burning your money at a workshop coming up tomorrow night on weatherization. Given our extreme weather, it's never too late to get more tips or to be reminded of things that you can do to just button up your home. So the Energy Committee is hosting this Step Up to Button Up Middlebury workshop tomorrow at 6:30 at the Congregational Church in Middlebury in the Unity Hall there. There are some prizes, and you'll learn about how you can be eligible for up to $4,000 in incentive money from Efficiency Vermont for your projects. So again, you just want to look at how you can stop the cold air from coming in and the heat from getting out. We don't want to have to heat the sky, so come and find out what you can do and what incentives are available.
Thank you, Laura. Nick?
Well, first of all, it was a good meeting. I really appreciate the fact that both the senators and representatives were here. It was a good dialogue, and I think it was the right length. We got a lot of good stuff. I know they heard us, and I'm hopeful that it will lead to some action on some of these things that have been ongoing and difficult for a long time, because we do want to solve them. It's interesting, Fahad brought up, and then Heather as well, on the issue of really, this is more of a county-wide issue. And maybe there's a situation where we would want to have communication with our, those who are in similar roles, and maybe Virgins and Bristol as a start, and to discuss these issues. And maybe it's not, I know there was a suggestion for a select board task force on homelessness, but maybe it's a county-wide task force that is what we're really looking at. So, but that's obviously dialogue for the future. But otherwise, it was a good meeting, and appreciate it being set up that way, and look forward to many more.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I have one thing for everybody. I'd like to go into executive session just to get you started on a personnel matter. It'll take me 3 minutes with you, but I need somebody to lead us into executive session.
I can do that. Okay. In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of a personnel matter and contracts would place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the personnel matter and contracts in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I further move that the board enter into an executive session to discuss personnel matters and contracts under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Once again, I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, 9:07, we're going into executive session.